Hi Music 103A students. This is the third video in the series on root position voice leading. And this is a demonstration on one of your homework assignments. This is in the workbook, page 48. Now your homework, it's numbers 1 and 3. So you have numbers 1 and 3. So what I'm going to do today is go over numbers 2 and 4 with you. So again, you have workbook page 48, numbers 1 and 3. I'm going to go over numbers 2 and 4 with you. Okay, number 2 is in F minor. Now, before we begin this one, I did want to have a little bit of discussion about this chord. Notice they're asking us to write the major 7 chord in F minor. You're going to have the same thing in your homework for number 3 in E minor. And let's talk about that a little bit. So we learned that in a minor key, you typically use the leading tone to spell 5 and 7 diminished. You can see it here in the 5 chord. Here's the leading tone for the 5 chord. The diminished chord on scale degree 7 on the leading tone in F minor is spelled E natural, G, and B flat. The major 7 chord is spelled E flat, G, and B flat. Now the difference is the leading tone chord, 7 diminished, typically progresses to 1, whereas this chord, the major 7 chord, which is also known as the subtonic chord because it's a whole step below the tonic, progresses to 3. Now, the reason why we have this major 7 chord in these exercises is because we have not learned inversions yet. And usually the diminished triad is found in first inversion. We haven't learned the voice leading for first inversion triads yet. So what we're looking at here is the major 7 chord, which is spelled E flat, G, and B flat in this key, a whole step below the tonic, as opposed to the one that's spelled on E natural, G, and B flat. Now, the first thing I would like you to do here, and you can pause the video here in just a second while you're working on it, is go ahead and write the names of all the notes that are in these chords so that we can tell what the common tones are and that we know what the root and the third and the fifth are for each one. So go ahead and pause the video right now and do that. Okay, so once you've identified the names of all the notes in the chords, it should look like this. Now let's take a look at the chord progression that we have here. 1 to 5, that's up a fifth. So of course there's one common tone. You can see that it's the C. 5 to 1 is up a fourth. The C's are common. 1 to 7 is down a second. Now we're used to going up a second, but here it is a second away, so there are no common tones between here and here. 7 to 3, 7, 1, 2, 3 is up a fourth. So you can see the E flat's common. 3 to 4 is up a second, no common tones. 4 to 5 is up a second, again, no common tones. Now we're going to be revoicing the same chord here, so 5 twice in a row. Remember, there are separate guidelines that apply to revoicing the same chord. And then 5 to 1 is up a fourth. So you can see the C is common between 5 and 1. So remember the common chord progressions, up a fourth, one common tone between those chord progressions in that chord progression. Down a third, 2 common tones in that one. And up a second would have no common tones. Okay? So let's take a look at the voice leading here. We need to pick out the tenor and the alto. Now, of course, if we write the C in the tenor, we have nowhere to write the alto. So let's go A flat and C here. Okay, so now we have this chord. Okay. And the next one, if we can keep the C as a common tone, we should. And so let's keep that C as a common tone. Now we have 2 roots and a third. We need the fifth. Right? So keep the common tone, move by step. You can see we're going to come right back to the 1 chord where we started here. Keep that common tone. And you can see that chord 1 and 3 are the same. Okay, into the next chord, there are no common tones. And again, we want two roots, 1/3, 1/5. So remember, in root position, voice leading, you're doubling the root most often. We have a root and a third. We need another root and a fifth. Well, you can see that we can get the B flat here and the E flat here. Now remember, a third leap is fine. You just don't want to leap a fourth or greater in those upper parts. Okay, and then moving to 3, 7 to 3, there's one common tone, the E flat. Let's see if we can keep that E flat common tone. Remember, keeping the common tone means to keep it in the same voice, so we kept it in the alto part there. And now we have A flat twice, two roots, and 1/5. We're missing the C, right? And you can see we can get that C here by step in the tenor part. So from the beginning. And again, it's all about singability. You want to make the parts as easily sung as possible, keeping common tones, moving by step. A third leap is okay in those upper parts, but don't leap a fourth or greater. Between 3 and 4, there are no common tones. And again, be careful that you're not writing parallels. Don't move everything up with the bass. You're going to move in contrary motion to the bass here. So now we have two B flats and the fifth, but we also need D flat. Now remember that anytime you have a chord progression that goes up a second, you will have a third leap. The third leap was already given to us in the soprano part. Keep in mind that if they were to move the A flat to the B flat, you'd have a parallel octave with the bass. And if you move the E flat to the F in the alto part, you'd have a parallel fifth with the bass. So here's what that sounds like, moving in contrary motion to the bass. Okay, and then moving into the 5 chord here, again, there are no common tones. So we have to move everything down. We need another C. Now, if you write the C here, notice that's a parallel octave with the tenor and the bass. So go down to avoid that parallel octave. And there's that characteristic third leap that you always expect when you're moving chords up a second. And then we can double the root here. And from the beginning. Okay, now moving, revoicing the same chord, we want to make sure that we redistribute the voices so that we have two roots, 1/3 and 1/5. Now remember the whole rule is you can keep the common tone, or you can move it up to the next member of the chord, which would be C, or down to the next member, which would be E. Now you could try this, you could actually try it, but there is a problem with it. Don't forget your leading tone. Notice how the E natural here in the tenor is lower than the next bass. We also have nowhere to move this voice in the next chord. So this is an overlap, and it's going to be a little bit problematic. So I'm going to erase it and show you a different way to approach it. All right, so the other option is to actually move this G up to the C. And remember, a fourth leap in the upper parts is permissible when you're revoicing the same chord. So that's the only time that you can make a leap of a fourth in the soprano, alto, or tenor under normal circumstances is when you're revoicing the same harmony. Well, we have two roots. We also need the third, and we have the fifth there. Now this is a curious situation. You see this E natural here is actually in the soprano part. You do technically have to mark it in because it's in a different voice. This is the alto part. So the rule with accidentals, they only carry through the same measure in the same octave and also in the same voice. So this E natural technically does not carry through to the alto part because it is a different voice. All right, now to finish this one up, the common tone is C. But notice what happens if we keep that C common tone. We have nowhere to move the A flat, right? If we did move this one down to the A flat, notice two things happen. First of all, we have a big leap here, which we don't want. And we have a voice crossing because now the tenor is higher than the alto. Well, to fix that, we're not going to be able to keep the common tones. So the C here will go down to the A flat, and this E natural will go down to the C. So remember that happens when you have chords that are a fourth apart. If you don't keep that common tone, you'll have those third leaps in there. And now we have our two roots, our 1/3 and our 1/5. This is a C. Okay, let's take a listen to the whole thing now. All right, and we're also going to take a look at number 4 on page 48 in the workbook together. The chord progression on this one has the 1 chord 3 times in a row. But as you revoice it, it will not get stale or boring. You'll see that it actually sounds pretty good when you revoice it. It's going to end up sounding like this. Because the inner voices and the soprano line will switch around. 5 to 1 is up a 4th. 1 to 5, of course, is up a 5th. Once we learn about chord progressions, we'll learn that any chord can and will follow the tonic. So any chord can come after 1. 5 going to 6 is up a 2nd. It's also that special chord progression that we talked about where you want to double the 3rd of the 6th chord. So 5 going to 6, you want to double the 3rd of the 6th chord, right? 6 to 4 is down a 3rd, so we'll have 2 common tones. 4 to 5, up a 2nd, no common tones, and we want to make sure that we don't move everything in the same direction, avoiding parallels. And then, of course, 5 to 1 is up a 4th. We'll take just a moment right now, pause the video, and write in all the names of the notes in all these chords. Okay, and this is what it should look like once you have all the note names written in. And again, it's helpful to have that because then you know what the root and the 3rd and the 5th is. You know which one to double, the root usually, right? And you also know the common tones. You can see them a little bit more a little easier. So between 1 and 5, for example, the F is common, right? And between 5 and 1, you can see that the F is still common, so on. No common tones from here to here. From here to here, you can see that the G and the B flat are common, right? So it just helps a lot to be able to see that. Now let's make sure we select a good first voicing here. We're given the root and the 3rd, so we need another root in the 5th. Of course, if I put the B flat in the tenor, you have nowhere to write the alto. So let's write the F in the tenor part and the B flat and the alto. Sounds like this. Okay, now the key to this one is notice how the bass line is going up so rapidly here. We have a really high bass. The key is to move all these inner parts up so that by the time you get here, you have a high tenor and a high alto. And you can see that we can do that by just simply moving these voices up to the next member of the chord. It's all the same harmony, right? So the F moves up to the B flat moves up to the D. Now remember, you want to preserve having 2 roots, 1/3 and 1/5. And then again, let's just keep moving up. So now we have 2 roots, so we need a 5th and a 3rd. Okay, and the next chord is F chord, and we have the root and the 5th, and so we want another root and the third. Now, notice if we try to keep the common tone, the F, we would have to leap down a fourth to the A. The A and the tenor would also create a voice overlap with the next chord because the bass would be higher than the tenor. So to avoid that, let's move the F up to the A, and then the D up to the F. So this is keeping no common tones, but having those third leaps in there. And from the beginning. Now at this point, with this really high tenor and higher alto, we should be okay with this high bass line and not having any crossings or overlaps. Let's see if we can keep the F now as a common tone into the next chord. So we keep that F in the tenor part. You can see now we have a root and a third and a fifth. We're missing the other root. Of course, we can just move up to it by step here in the alto part. Okay, and then let's see if we can keep the F again into the next chord. Look to keep that common tone first. Here we have two roots and a fifth, and then we can also grab the third in the alto part. It's actually coming right back to the chord that we just left. Notice how this chord right here and here are the same voicing. Okay, now 5 to 6, that's that special chord progression. Remember that you want to double the third of the sixth chord, which is B flat, right? So we want two B flats. And you can see why. If we were to move the F to the G, we'd have parallel octaves. So to avoid that, move this voice down, and there's that third leap that you expect. Anytime you have a progression up by a second, you'll have that third leap in one of the voices. And of course, if we move that C to the D in the soprano, we'd have parallel fifth. So they moved it down to the B flat to avoid that. The leading tone typically resolves. So you can see we have the A, which is the leading tone in the key of B flat, resolving up to the B flat, and we double the third. So one root, one fifth, two thirds. Okay, and finishing up here, we have two common tones between 6 and 4, and they are the G and the B flat. The B flat has already been kept. Of course, the G here in the bass is moving, so we're not able to keep the G because we had the third double, remember. But we can move it back down to this G here in the alto. Now we have a root and a third and a fifth. We need another root, which you can write in the tenor part. So from the beginning, okay, now this chord right here is going to have no common tones with the 4, right? No common tones between 4 and 5 because it's up a second. Everything should move in contrary motion with the bass, so the bass moves up, everything should move down. This is going to go to the C. Now be careful, if you move the E flat to the F, you'd have a parallel octave between the bass and the tenor. And if you move the B flat up to the C, you'd have a parallel fifth between the bass and the soprano. So moving this down, and leaping a third down prevents that from happening. Okay, and last chord, we can keep this common tone. Right, keep the common tone F, and then move this voice to the third by step. We have two roots, one third and one fifth. here's the whole thing.